Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar from the Business Desk. My name is Alex Turner, and I'll be our host for this morning. It's great to have so many of you with us for what is our second webinar in our Pace of Change series, which we're doing in partnership with Squire Patton Boggs. The first webinar was on policy, and the second webinar this morning's subject is on automation in the new normal. And we'll be following that up with climate change and ethics in the months ahead. And it's really focused on the economy of the North to look at these long-term trends that are happening and to really explore the strengths that we have across the North, and also what needs to be done to make sure that our economy is positioned as well as it can be to face these challenges and opportunities over the years and decades ahead. We've got a great panel joining us this morning with a real expertise in the subject. So we have Paul Hallett, the co-founder of VetEye, Furqan Alamgir, the chief executive of Connexin, Matthew Kirk, the international affairs advisor at Squire Patton Boggs, Elizabeth Clark, chief executive of Dream Agility, and Barry Singleton, the chief relationship officer from Scaled Insights. And we'll be hearing from them all in the next hour. The format is just a straightforward panel discussion, which I will kick off very shortly. You can get involved. For those of you who haven't used Zoom before, if you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Click that, you can put your questions in there, and I will look to weave them in as we go along through the session. And also leave some time at the end to get to some of those that we haven't been able to get to during the discussion itself. That's the longest I'm going to speak for in one go today, you'll be pleased to know. So I'd like each of our panelists to just briefly introduce themselves and just say what excites you most about automation and AI in your work. Paul, if I could start with you, please.
Thank you, cheers for that. No, my name's Paul Hallett, I'm the CEO of VetEye. And so as a business, what we're doing is we're making pet care more accessible and affordable for pet owners using groundbreaking technologies. What excites us most about AI is the opportunity around prediction and prevention. We believe that AI will enable us to actually protect the lives of our pets and human lives in time. So I think it will have a big impact on healthcare really and the way we live. So that's me.
Great, thank you. Furqan.
Good morning, thanks Alex. Firstly, thanks for having me here today. Good to be on the panel. So my name is Furqan, I'm the founder and CEO of Connexin. At Connexin, we're building smarter connected communities. Obviously, this is an area of real passion for us because we firmly believe that harnessing the power of data will do good. I have a very Japanese view on AI and technology in that I see it as kind of a tool to enable and drive us forward rather than kind of replace skill within what we're trying to achieve. So this is an area of real focus for us and really glad to be here this morning.
Thank you. Matthew.
Thank you very much, Alex. Good morning. My name is Matthew Kirk. I'm at Squire Patton Boggs. We're a law firm. We like to think we're a law firm with a bit of a difference in that we look at policy and the evolution of policy alongside law, as well as providing legal services. And obviously for the legal profession, AI presents some exciting opportunities, some interesting challenges, and takes you into a whole load of new areas of law. For me personally, what's exciting at this point is the conjuncture of the accelerator effect of COVID, the big change that we're having through Brexit, and the potential of technology to provide us with some answers and some capability which will enable us to have an economy that mixes the industrial and the post-industrial in one. And I think the North is fantastically well placed to benefit from that as we go forward.
Great. Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Clark from Dream Agility, based out in sunny Silicon Valley. We have our company is basically a machine learning and visual AI, and we work with people who advertise on Google and Facebook, particularly people who have giant feeds. Our biggest feed is 3.5 million products. What excites us about automation is we did it so we could sleep at night. And the surprise as a result of that was people getting triple-digit increases on their sales. We've always had a thing where if you have to do something for more than 15 minutes a day, let's automate it. But now it's like, if you do something irritates you, let's just automate it. And there's tools out there for everyone. Even your granny can do it now.
Sounds good.
Morning, everybody. I'm Barry. I'm the Chief Relationship Officer for Scaled Insights. We're an SME based at the Nexus building on the cusp of the University of Leeds' campus. We're really working to try and enable the discovery of new behavioural insights that actually solve big data's inherent weakness, because big data is all about studying people's past actions to try and predict their future actions, and it doesn't necessarily understand why people make decisions. What excites me is the fact that I think, just to add another P to Paul's two Ps that he mentioned earlier, I think personalisation in things like healthcare, education, and financial services, particularly around supporting people who are vulnerable in the current climate, or people who are unable to actually get into kind of those kind of physical spaces as we are at the moment. And I think it has a lot of value to add to those kind of conversations.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Let's start with the thing that's in front of our face at the moment, in COVID, and just how that's changing how businesses are operating, how they're thinking. I said, Matthew, it's created this real accelerator effect. How do, Matthew, I'll come to you. How do businesses sort of embrace that and look at how they can grasp this disruption in a positive manner?
So it's a really, really interesting question, Alex. And I think the first thing I'd say, I used to work in telecoms, and I think the capability to switch to the kind of working we're doing now is pretty recent. If this pandemic had hit us 10, 15 years ago, it would have had a much more profound effect on office-based work than it has. Broadly speaking, office-based work has simply moved where it's done. And that's the first sort of big change you get out of it. But I think there are other big changes that will come as well in international trade, in the way that companies think about supply chains, with proximity and resilience becoming much more important. And that inevitably means greater technology in the supply chain as well. So COVID, as I said, it's an accelerator of many, many things, but it's certainly an accelerator of the use of technology in business and in our day-to-day lives. You look at how our interactions with the medical profession have changed. You look at schools, some of them very successfully, some of them less so, shifting a lot of education online, universities doing the same. And all of this has happened extraordinarily quickly. I don't think we're yet doing it in a fully developed way, but we're learning the whole time about what you can do with technology, also what you can't do, because I have a profound belief that technology can replicate many, many things out of physical life, but it can't replicate human genius, creativity, and so forth. And so there will still, in the future world, be a role for human beings.
Elizabeth, what impact have you seen in your work and in your sector in the recent months?
Well, we've literally gone automation crazy. Little things that would normally somebody in the office would say, could you just do this or could you just do that? They just kind of drop off the edge of the table. Years ago, if you had a child on work experience, you'd be able to give them photocopy. Well, that stopped a long time ago. Now, if you get somebody on work experience, you can say, oh, well, can you go into the social media and respond to this or respond to that? Now, you can just sit there and in half an hour, you can build a webhook or a Zap that will do all that work for you. So you don't have to look at it again. And if it breaks, it sends you a message to say, oh, your Zap's just broken. You need to fix it. So even little tiny things are being taken care of without a human actually having to look at them. It's just less and less for people to do. So like Matthew says, you can use your brain for something far more interesting than something very dull and administrative.
And Barry, I guess, using your brain to do interesting things, I guess, is what behavioural insights is all about, isn't it? It's about really trying to do the hard thinking. And I know I see a lot of the comments around kind of government strategy at the moment saying that actually one of the things they're missing is that understanding of behavioural insights. So How do you get companies to understand its importance and relevance?
I think if I give you an example of something we're working on, so we know from working with the clinicians here at the university, at the Teaching Hospital Trust in Leeds and the university, that something like 50% of men who are prescribed statins or blood pressure medicines don't take them as they're prescribed. So that has an impact on their health and on the health system, and it costs money, and it potentially costs their lives. So I understand what people are saying about removing the human from the process. I get that, but in that instance, how can you actually capture the intuition of a really good clinician who understands how to communicate or nudge their patient towards that healthier outcome without the human being there? That's the kind of problem that we're looking at trying to solve, because without that, then that the human touch is completely gone. And I think definitely that COVID's accelerated this process towards driving people online and doing things more digitally. But it's a bit of a dichotomy of purpose in health and financial services. I don't know if you've tried to contact your bank lately, but actually getting through on a phone is impossible, or your broadband supplier. You literally cannot communicate with them, and quite frankly, some of their automated chatbots leave a lot to be desired because they don't necessarily solve the problem, and there isn't a human that can interpret a very different or a slightly sort of left field request. So I think we've got a long way to go before we can fully trust these automated systems, but we're on the right track.
And Paul, you've been looking to disrupt your market for long before we knew what coronavirus was. But the idea of using AI as a disruptor to a sector, is something that people are now paying much more attention to. How did you go about that?
Well, I think first thing to sort of recognise is, the veterinary industry overall hasn't shifted really for 100 years or so. It's remained the same. So the first thing really was to introduce technology to the sector in a kind of lower tier point of view, from a telehealth viewpoint, and actually delivering consultations through vets online. I mean, that was a huge step for the industry to take. And I guess before COVID, our biggest problem was changing customer behaviour. They've been used to that. They've obviously formed those habits over all those years. So what COVID has done is it's forced customers to change. And now what we've got as a result is actually works really well. And we've been able to collect large samples of evidence to back technology as something that will stay for the future. And what that means for the pet owner is affordable care. They've never been able to access affordable care. In fact, it's one of the big pain points of the industry, is that customers aren't going to the vet because of the price. So, hey ho, technology comes along and there's a solution now. So we can take that burden off charity and start delivering care at a lower value. So for us, there's a huge opportunity in, speaking to customers in a different way using tech. And, telehealth is the start, and where it goes from there is also really exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, isn't it? That AI itself isn't the disruptor; it's the enabler, isn't it? It's customer demand that is the real disruptor.
I think that's the mistake everyone makes, don't they? I think they see tech as like almost the issue. It's not. It's customers' needs not being met, and we all know that customers need more affordability. We know they need convenience. The drivers that we all desire. So I think what technology is doing is pushing those buttons, and I think legacy type operations that don't fasten to those customer values will be left behind. I think that's the key thing. We have to adapt to what customers' needs are.
And Furqan, your work around smarter connected communities is I suppose preparing for this future demand and working out what consumer need will be over the long term. Where do you start in kind of shaping that?
Well, I think you put it quite well. Technology is an enabler for change, right? If you look at what's going on in the environments that we live in, there's more and more urbanization. There's kind of stricter resource limitation from a availability perspective. Kind of more kids, fewer schools. fewer hospital beds for an aging population. You know, how do you manage that increasing demand with limited resources without some sort of innovation? So technology is a must in that space to kind of enable that change, similar to how, you know, how Paul was mentioning in the pet industry. You know, I'll give you an example. You know, some of the simple technologies, putting a sensor in a street bin, it tells you when the bin is full, so you don't have to drive a truck 15 miles to the end of nowhere to empty an empty bin. But then what else are we getting from that? We're getting insight, so we can start predicting kind of on a daily basis or a weekly basis. You know, on a Wednesday, these bins may be full because there's an event that happens on Wednesdays and more people attend these takeaways. So we can start forecasting and predicting. And I guess the whole aim in this is using technology as a tool so that we can apply ourselves in a more effective way. So for example, if we can predict how we can better manage people's demand of services, we can adjust those services. And, you know, if you look at just what's going on with kind of track and trace, you know, that kind of shows you how we lack this kind of connectivity and understanding of what goes on in our communities. And our mission as a business is to enable that, to connect things together, bring that information into a place and allow us to kind of learn and adapt.
And I think that's a really good example with the bins about how technology is there to enhance, not replace. I mean, technology in itself can't empty the bins in the streets, can it? But
exactly.
But we can really improve productivity and efficiency by best use of technology.
Exactly. And, you know, it's like, for example, if you were running a taxi business with horse and carriage and someone comes out with a car, you know, it's innovate or die, right? In technology, you're seeing that happen at kind of lightning pace. And many people are still sitting on the fence. You know, loads of people are still using kind of unlicensed Microsoft Office, or, you know, kind of they hadn't even adopted kind of the cloud way of computing. So I think COVID has been one of the biggest drivers of digitization that we've seen in our lifetime. So from that side, in a weird way, it's been quite a positive.
Yeah, and yeah, we're only a couple of months away from another, you know, seismic change in the economy. Brexit. Somebody had to mention it first, so it might as well be me. Matthew, an awful lot of I think pressure is going to be put on technology solutions to ensure the transition runs as smoothly as possible. Is that going to work? Are we ready for a technology-led Brexit?
I doubt it, but technology is only as good as the people using it, and I think we're all going to need to learn. This is anyone trading or dealing into what will be the separate European Union from the 1st of January. You know, this is a huge change, a change that none of us have seen in our generation. And it will be very different, and there'll be all sorts of processes we'll have to do, and we'll have to learn how to do them. But technology can undoubtedly make it much simpler. There are some challenges as well, though, and I think particularly looking at data and data flows between the UK and the EU, we don't yet know what the picture will be on that. And I think anyone watching this who has significant data exchanges with partners elsewhere in Europe does need to do some work now to work out how they can make sure that they can carry on having the exchanges they need to have in order for their business to thrive.
And actually, I think that data flow comes on to a really important point about rules and regulations, you know, and exactly who's creating the rules and to what benefit. I suppose the broader point around, you know, some of the ethics around AI. I mean, what's the current position, Matthew, in terms of kind of the general trend on AI and ethics?
Well, I think this is a possible area of benefit out of Brexit because, I mean, in terms of the overall regulatory framework, what the rules are will be the same on the 1st of January it was on the 31st of December. The government is not going to start playing around with that, particularly not in the middle of a pandemic. There's the possibility to move in a different direction over time, and I think the technology area is one where that does give opportunities. But more important than that, I think over the last 10, 15 years, the European Union has become very precautionary in its approach to regulation, regulating to prevent harm before it's happened. The Anglo-Saxon approach to regulation has traditionally been more, show me the harm, show me, where something has actually gone wrong, and I'll then see whether I need to do anything to fix it. And that Anglo-Saxon approach, evidence-based approach, is much more innovation friendly. So I think there is a real chance for us to experiment with some things which will be politically harder to do in the EU without actually having a radically different regulatory framework, and without deviating that much. It'll be a question of how you apply the regulation rather than what the regulation is trying to do.
Paul, I think
sorry. I was just going to say, I just wanted to go back to something Matthew said a bit earlier about technology is only as good as the people who are using it. I think that's true, but also it's only as good as the people who are developing it. And I think it was Cathy O'Neill who wrote Weapons of Mass Destruction, who said that algorithms are opinions embedded into code. And if the opinions of those people are pretty bad or they have bad intentions, then bad things can happen. So I think that's something that we all obviously need to be cognizant of, is that the people who are developing it, the more diverse those people are, the more likely we are to have positive outcomes for more people in society. I think the exams algorithm is a really good example of that, and there's many more that we could talk about.
Yeah, it's a really important point, isn't it? How does the industry in its widest sense prevent as much as it can those biases being built in effectively inadvertently?
You've got to make sure you have a diverse workforce yourself. Don't just recruit in the one image. We have people from all over the world. We speak different languages. We've tried very much to pick people who have different opinions, so that when we're looking at stuff, we can get a broader view as possible. It was a great example last week with the passport photos. If you are black, you're much more likely to get your passport photo rejected, because it doesn't take into account the sort of lips. There was one girl who was being told her lips were open and they weren't, they were just the shape of her lips. Using visual AI, it needs to be trained on everything across the board, not just people that look like you. So it's a very important consideration. And when Brexit came up a few years back, we got an inquiry from Australia. And we thought, Australia, we can't possibly deal with Australia. That's like the other side of the world. It's going to be so difficult dealing with them. It's dead easy. You just invoice them. There's no funniness with VAT or anything. It's really easy. But then you've got the problem of the time zone difference. They're 11 hours apart from us. And if we're spending an awful lot of their money, we need to know what's going on. And particularly in lockdown, because they're not having those little micro conversations. So we've had to build a suite of tools that's going to kind of predict what's going on, guess what's happening, and they're in a lockdown as well. So there's an awful lot going on behind the scenes. And we found, funnily enough, this expression TIAV came up that the Australian client wasn't aware of. It came up thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and apparently it's come from TikTok. It stands for trip in a van, and none of us had any idea. And now they've got a whole new product as a result of this TIAV thing that's come from TikTok. And we wouldn't have had any idea about it if we hadn't put all these systems in place. It is hard, sort of trying to get past Brexit and deal in other territories. It's going to create a whole new set of problems you're going to have to automate for and be able to predict when you can't speak to see people in. Because we can't solve the time zone problem. That's the one thing we really can't fix. It doesn't stop people messaging me in the middle of the night. I can't get around that one yet. I'm having to predict what's going on.
Paul, a lot of these problems are effectively going to be fixed or addressed is a better word, at an industry level. I know you've spoken previously about some of the challenges of when the bigger organisations in an industry effectively can be quite protectionist when companies like yours are trying to disrupt through technology. Yeah,
well, let's be straight. They're trying to put us out of business, and the reality is they see technology as a giant threat, and it is because the majority of the decision makers are traditionalists, And there's been no thought as, who are the technologists in these regulatory bodies making some of the decisions or helping create balance in the councils. I think the key thing that we all should do, from a regulatory point of view, is make sure we're making decisions based on the best evidence. That's the key thing, not opinion. Opinion, what COVID's done for our business is sort of before COVID, there was a huge amount of opinion on, can a vet see a pet online, the safety of not physically examining a pet. But what the evidence now says is that's just nonsense. A vet can perfectly do all those things online for the majority of cases. I think the RCVS and the council are not looking at the evidence when they're making decisions about the regulatory framework that the industry needs to build on. And I think they see us as a giant threat, not an enabler. I think the bank machines of the 1970s, if you think back, the banks were really worried that would take the jobs. What it actually did is accelerated more engagement into the banks. And I think overall, we need to consider technology as that as well. It will create so many more opportunities for everyone. And from pet industry point of view, it will create more engagement from pet owners, in that earlier stage, that preventative stage, where at the moment they're sort of sitting on the fence waiting for something worse to happen because ultimately they can't get to a vet because of the price. So we're thinking there's so many opportunities in this space if technology is embraced.
And Furqan, how are you addressing those privacy and ethical questions in your work?
Really good question. Well, stepping back a step, I guess data is, in my opinion, it's binary. It tells you something or it doesn't, right? And I think it's how you refine that data that needs a layer of governance on it as well. Coming back to Barry's earlier point around kind of the algorithm bias, but I think that's a really important point, and I think it needs further developing. If anyone says today there's a good framework of governance around how data is handled, that's just all made up. GDPR is good from kind of a personal privacy perspective, but how many people here have signed up for something and just tick the box to proceed with no idea of what information is being shared? We ran a little experiment with YouTube where you can go in and change your personal preferences and say, look, I don't want you to track me and show me ads. And you start seeing some really odd ads in a way to kind of almost encourage you to repersonalize them. So there's a lot to be thought about how data can be used in a better way. We've seen kind of the Googles try and collect data for themselves. Our approach is very much that the data belongs to the citizen and the community, for example, the local authority. And our job is more refining data. You hear the term data is the new oil. Well, we're the oil refinery. That product belongs to them, and we want to keep it that way for as long as we can. But I think the market's shifting. I've seen some interesting business models around kind of data passports, where you own and control your own data, and you can exchange that in return for value. For example, medical research or clinical trials or kind of buying behavior, if you're willing to share that kind of information. So this whole kind of value of data journey is just starting, and it's an interesting space to kind of watch and invest in if you sit on that kind of the fence.
Yeah, that's true. That.
Can I just comment on what? Oh, sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No, you go, Matthew. I'll follow you.
I was just going to say a quick. Thank you, Paul. Quick comment on what Furqan was just saying there, because I think this is a really interesting area. As Furqan said, we've got GDPR that regulates personal data, but there's a huge amount of value in non-personal data, industrial data that's just about stuff, and we don't really have a developed framework around that. We don't know how to value it. In many companies, their most valuable asset in future will be their access to data and their ability to analyze it. And yet, how many companies show data holdings in their balance sheet? None. And we don't know how to trade in data, how to contract in data, creating data trusts. There are vast ranges of stuff that we're just beginning to experiment with. And I think the real sort of value that can be found in data is when you start bringing together previously dissociated data sets, and you start looking at what those can tell you, the kinds of insights those can give. And that way you can create enormously more value for lots of people. And the other key thing about data is it's the only asset you will ever have that doesn't lose its value when you share it. In fact, it can even gain value when you share it. So it's a very different mindset to a traditional corporate asset.
I'd add to that, just to really focus in on that data piece. There is a huge amount of talk about the whole data collection piece, but I would challenge it with the idea that you have to collect the data in the right way for it to be valuable. I think for instance, from what we're seeing as a business, we look at a combination of factors such as completeness, accuracy, lack of bias, relevance, timelessness of data, to ensure that that data strategy that links those components is consistent in order to get to that scale piece, the AI piece quicker. So again, I think you can see it a lot, again, in this profession. There's huge amounts of data sets, but the problem is it's fragmented, it's not organized. And so then the task to organize is challenging in its own right. So I guess from our personal business perspective, we've had to restructure the way the industry collects data in a way that enables AI in the future. And remember, that scale piece is key. We're not going to deliver AI if you haven't got that scale of data in the right format, and it's as simple as that. So data is as much a part of AI as AI is to data.
Yeah, and I think so of this, it comes down to investment, both in terms of cash and time. And we've got a question from Dawn Lynch, which I will put in your direction, Elizabeth. Dawn's asked, is a small not-for-profit charity, automation is key, but they find it difficult with limited resources and funds to implement and break the cycle. So any suggestions, she asks, on effectively where to start?
Go and look up Zapier, Z-A-P-I-E-R. It's like a simple man's version of webhooks. So if, for example, you get a massive inbox and lots of it's spam, you can build a Zap that will pick out certain words or things that you want to highlight, and it can shoot it off to a Slack channel or something like to your urgent Slack channel. So if you have a massive inbox, you don't have stuff that kind of sits in there. Again, with your if you're doing things on Facebook and you're fundraising on Facebook, there's a lot you can do there with automating parts of that. So you can for example, if you're trying to get through to people that are actually going to give you money, you don't waste time on people that aren't going to give you money if you're advertising. And you can build little sort of chat bots in there that will do that and then spin it off to a human being at the right point. You can use automation, you can use bots in LinkedIn. So you can go searching for people in LinkedIn who have so many years experience in companies of a certain size. Chances are they've got money. You can use a bot to target them and then keep targeting them and then handle the response as well. So there's a lot you can do. The fundraiser's job is kind of almost out the window. And the longer we spend in situations like lockdown, where we're not relying on our personal networks, we have to rely on the ones we can create online. So we really should be looking to, and Zapier costs like $25 a month, something like that. It's for the work it can do for you, it's dirt cheap. So I would start there.
Barry, what would you suggest for companies and organisations who are looking at how they should get started properly on this?
What, in terms of charities? Sorry.
No, just the broader, perhaps more the SME audience. Where should they start if they say, right, I need to get a grip of automation and AI. I need to apply it to my business. Where do they begin?
I suppose they need to understand what problems they're trying to solve in the first place, and really understand what problems automation could actually help them to fix or to fulfill. I think the good thing about automation is it can increase capacity within a business, and you don't necessarily have to increase too much headcount, so you can fulfill some of those mundane, monotonous tasks that are machines designed and perfectly developed to do. So if you can identify what are those challenges you want to fix with some kind of automation, then that's probably the best place to start.
Great. And if we just sort of expand our thoughts for a few minutes in terms of the North and the Northern economy. You know, Paul, if I could start with you, which areas do you think the North performs well on in terms of, you know, innovation and automation?
Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, we're very lucky to be in the north of England and in Leeds as a business. I think for us, the connections with the universities, I mean, we're based in Nexus. So again, like Barry, I meet Barry for a coffee every now and again in the cafe there. They've got a connection with the university, which is access to real academic validation and scientific validation. And so, you know, for a technology business that wants to remain ethical and drive forward, there's, you know, having that access to the university is incredibly important. I think that is a real strength, you know, our universities and kind of our shared, I guess as a Leeds community, we kind of work together very well. I mean, we work with a design agency based in Leeds, we work with a law firm based in Leeds, we work with a testing company based in Leeds, a recruiter based in Leeds, a PR agency. So we're kind of building our ecosystem in Leeds. And it's having a big effect on the way we're growing the business. So yeah, I think it's a thriving economy, Leeds. It's an exciting place to be.
Great. Furqan, what do you think in terms of how the North is performing relative to elsewhere?
I think we're starting to show that, you know, the talent exists in the area. I won't lie and say it's been easy. You know, when I raised our Series A, I had quite a bit of pressure from the investment community to relocate down into London, because the market said you will get better talent, and the investment push is always about recruiting the best people, because the best people solve the challenges. But you know, now reflecting back on it, it's been 3 years since that Series A. We've raised over $100 million into the business. We just announced an £80 million raise in September. It shows that actually there is a degree of confidence in investing in the North. There is the talent available in the region. You know, like Paul was mentioning there, Leeds as a hub is accelerating and growing quite quickly. And I don't know how many of you guys have made the trip to the east to Hull yet, but it's a city of entrepreneurs. I've never met so many people that run their own business, right? So having that kind of work ethic, that ethos, access to people who are willing to take new risks and challenges, you know, it's not been easy. I think most people have the traditional view of kind of, you know, going to university here and then going for a job in Manchester or London, but yeah, we're seeing that change, and yeah, we've recruited a lot locally as well, and the business is growing year on year quite healthily, and you know, getting kind of global investors to invest in Hull for me is a real sign of kind of stamp in the box to say that there is confidence in the North.
Yeah. Barry, I can see you were nodding along there. Does that reflect your experience?
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting a bit dewy-eyed and reflecting to my time at university in Hull. So it'd be good to go and see you again there sometime, Furqan. We were conceived in Toronto, so we were very much conceived and incubated by our parent in Toronto, in Canada. And the primary reason for choosing to locate this business in Leeds was the ecosystem that Paul mentioned before. I mean, I'm sitting here now looking at some of the amazing signs that the students are writing as they've been isolating in their building next to us. There's the, you know, LGI's there, Leeds General Infirmary, and there's the university campus there. So we chose it because of what we're doing is quite experimental in some instances. You know, the research with clinicians and academics looking at understanding how to really nudge people towards healthier choices, using language as the differentiator in those predictive models. So exactly what Paul said, we chose it because of the ecosystem, because of the availability of talent and the quality of the universities, and that ability to engage with them and have introductions to people interested in working with us. And that seems to be, it's a stereotype that people are friendlier in the North, but I think sometimes there's an element of truth in some of those stereotypes.
Do you find do you find the investment challenge, like, you know, quite challenging in the North, Barry? I mean, for instance, we had to take that route to London as well. I think it is one of the pain points of the North, is where is that funding for early stage? I think the funding comes, doesn't it, when you start building a business that de-risks investors. But certainly from an early stage point of view, we struggled.
I think they seem to be addressing that. So MIT REAP is obviously is kind of come into the city, and I've got a funny feeling that they've developed some really interesting opportunities for early stage SMEs to kind of engage with that investment community. I think some of the accelerators like Propel YH, which we were engaged with, are fantastic for early stage companies in the kind of medtech space. But I think it's going to be an interesting, because I think we were talking beforehand, weren't we, about how difficult it is to actually meet and build relationships with people when you're in this pretty much predominantly online. Although having said that, my brother got a new job and has got a fantastic new job, and he's never met any of his colleagues during that process. So I think the investment thing is a challenge. I've heard people say that in the past, but it seems to me that the council, the universities, and the whole MIT REAP community are addressing that.
Because we can have the best tech hub in the world, can't we? But if we haven't got the investment into the technology, it can only go so far. So it is for me, it's a really key focus for the region, really, is to try and almost bring London investment parties into the north, invite them in partnership, and help accelerate some of these brilliant companies.
And do you think, Paul, that examples like the Hook Group, Boohoo, AO.com, which are basically tech businesses first and retailers second, and you know the successful IPOs and the huge growth that they've seen, does that help make the case to London and overseas investors that the North has the skills and the infrastructure to make those businesses thrive?
Well, I don't know how they start. I think, thinking about like Sky Bet, and that I think that started as an extension of Sky, didn't it? So that it was almost like, here's a pot of money, go. That's not how startups happen. There's a whole piece there of, angel funding that has to happen at the beginning, then you're into almost pre-seed and then seed, and it goes from there. And this is really before revenue, because you've got to build something in tech, haven't you, to make it work. So it's that phase. It's the phase of how do we take some of these brilliant entrepreneurs' ideas, and there's some brilliant ones in the region, and accelerate and make them happen, and trust and believe.
Yeah, what we did, Paul, was we kind of turned the story slightly and said, we have access to this northern market, and it's trying to reopen those doors. So getting the local authorities, the LEPs on side to say, okay, come and support northern businesses, give us this access so that we can build this here, rather than someone coming from Silicon Valley launching another Uber in Leeds, for example. It's better for you to invest in our local businesses. So we found when we shifted that to, rather than being a smart cities company focused on delivering business in the London boroughs, we focused on the Northern Powerhouse and really built our relationships and a kind of value proposition there, to say to London, well, if you want to access the North, this is the gateway to that. And I think we do have a ton of market opportunity in the North, and recognizing that and trying to develop that together as a community. And I know, Alex, you and the team at the Business Desk do a lot of these things, which I think are really, really useful in bringing that community together.
Can I just say, I think from an investor's perspective, again, COVID has accelerated a trend, but has really accelerated something that can act enormously in favour of both sides of the North, as it were, which is that geography has become relatively less important, and other attributes have become relatively more important when you're looking at where geographically you want to put your money, and there will be much more focus on how much of the corporate wallet is going on real estate than there was in the past, and really expensive real estate in central London, I think, is going to be quite challenged for a number of years to come. And the things that really matter, it seems to me, looking to the future, are things like skills. Have you got the right education, the right apprenticeship, all of that, so that you're turning out a workforce that is adaptable to using new technology. And then obviously connectivity and the ability to attract ecosystems. And I think it's a combination to what Paul was saying of enabling the startup, enabling the brilliant entrepreneur to get the financing they need and all of that, but also seeing some investors come in and see this as a good place in which to establish their UK branches or their business or whatever it is they want to do, because it's the combination of the two that then builds up the attraction for people who want to work in technology to come and work there. You get the Silicon Valley effect because you know that if you're good, you will get a job. You can take the risk of going into a startup, because if that one doesn't work, there'll be another one coming along when you need it. And it's that whole combination of factors. But where I think the North has a real advantage at the moment is, as I say, that geography is relatively less important in that balance of factors. And real estate in particular plays at the moment against London and the southeast.
Yeah, obviously that question of talent flared up yesterday with the government's old but suddenly very high profile ad campaign about your next job could be in cyber, which caused a lot of furore on Twitter and elsewhere yesterday. But Elizabeth, on that question of talent and skills development, and you mentioned at the start about the importance of recruiting a diverse workforce. You know, what are the challenges as a business owner in recruiting people with the right skills who understand what technology is trying to achieve?
You've got to tell a story. Years ago, I worked for a technology transfer company in Preston, and we had an infinitely variable transmission. We had a patent portfolio of 400 patents, but everyone from the auto industry had left Leyland. There was nobody left. So I had to sort of create a story around, why you would want to come to Preston and Leyland and work there. We've done exactly the same thing here. We've looked for people who are looking for, and the great thing about Ramsbottom is we've got the M62, the M66, the M65, the M6. We are connected to everything. So you can be anywhere you want to be very, very quickly. And we've got great food. Our offices are in the center of the village. There's free parking. It's cheap to live here. You can be anywhere you want to be. 2 minutes up the hill, you're up on the moors. If you like the outdoor, there's a lot of people like the outdoor thing. A lot of people don't want to commute. A lot of people like really interesting work. And everything we do on this sort of investment point, I've had investment before, and I'd rather poke my own eyes out than get it again. So and you can't test in Google. Everything in Google is live. So when we set something live, we're all sat there going, oh my God. So it's one of those things where it's a very edgy environment to work in. So you're going to have to take risks to be here. So it kind of appeals to a certain person. It's about getting your story right. And like I say, we have a focus on earning so we can borrow, so we can grow, and that's our whole kind of philosophy here. It's there's no one paying our bills. We've got to pay our bills ourselves. We've got to be resourceful. We've got to have people who can think commercially, which is quite hard when you've got people with PhDs. They're not known for thinking commercially. And we were part of the Applied AI Scale-Up, which was the first one the government did. And it was one of the challenges that everybody has. How do you find commercial PhDs? And you can actually set them little tests to see who are the ones that just want to sit and think all day, and who are the ones that can actually come up with a commercial proposition. And that's very important as well. Don't go down a rabbit hole thinking, yeah, finally I've got a PhD in machine learning or whatever. You need to find the ones with the right kind of attitude to be able to actually deliver something at the end of the day as well.
Yeah. Satnam Keel has just popped in a question that is at the apocalyptic end of what people worry about with AI and automation. They've asked, how far are we from Skynet/Cyberdyne taking over and assigning humankind to the scrap heap? I suppose that broader point of people worry and have done since the Luddites were trashing spinning jennies 200 years ago about automation and technology can lead to a lot of jobs. How do we make the case that it's actually about automating the routine tasks and therefore creating the opportunity for better jobs? Who wants to take that?
Well, we have that all the time. I'm selling a product to someone that's going to take away their job. So 25% of people don't want to hear it. 50% of people would like to hear it but don't understand it. And then there's a 25% at the other end who get it and want it. And then you just have to be careful about who you work with them. But if you ask people about the really awful, boring bits about their job, that they'd rather not do it. And if you show them that if you weren't doing that, you can do loads more of this, and you can triple your sales. What would you rather do? Is it going to win you some brownie points? Are you on the climb? Do you want promotion? Do you want again? It's selling a story to people that there is something better for them than what they have at the moment. I don't think anybody in their right mind wants to, go back down the mines and be with a pickaxe trying to get stuff out again. Nobody wants to. Nobody wants to have an ox and a thing. We all want tractors. I think they just need to be sold the story and taken on the journey.
I think work, Joe, it's got. I agree, Elizabeth. I think with work, I think there's this perception that work makes us happy, and actually the data says something completely different. It says it's one of the big causes of mental health issues, and so it's a problem that we need to fix. And I think reducing that time that everyone's spending, working hard on the things they don't particularly like, and enhancing the things they do like makes sense to drive in a more happier work, population in the future. So I think we should encourage, technologies to sort of change work for the better, and maybe people don't need to work as, in terms of time as much. Why not? But ultimately they're more productive because they're doing the stuff they love.
You just want to have more coffees than me, don't you? I think there's a problem in how it's framed, and I studied the media, so it's the media that are largely responsible for presenting these things in a binary format. Skynet versus Johnny Five. If you remember Johnny Five from Short Circuit, that was my first interaction with data. I loved him, but everything's so much more nuanced than that, isn't it? Gender, ethnicity, sexuality, that it's just not binary. And I think the problem that's presented to us by the media isn't binary. It's kind of passing the Daily Mail test, isn't it? Is one thing I've heard a lot from working with a lot of public sector people around these types of technologies.
I think it does come back to the point that was made earlier around. I think Barry, you made it around the algorithm bias. That actually there is technology out there that can crunch vast amount of data and start making decisions. The question is, when do we allow that technology to make those decisions? So there needs to be a level of governance around that. So Elon Musk is the one who talks about this the most, right, publicly, around kind of AI ruling the world, and something that does need to be governed. But when you think about really large data sets that count, where people are walking, what people are buying, how long people sleep, your watch knows that about you, what time you take a shower at, we do all fall into kind of cohorts, and you can start predicting behavior and kind of forecasting trends, and that is dangerous. And that there should be an element of kind of governance around who gets access to that data, how that data is managed, and how that data is protected, because there are people, who utilize that data for kind of the wrong reasons. And I think that it's a good question. And I know we're not at the stage where, kind of robots will make us work for them type of thing. But there are subtleties there where actually, with access to this kind of technology, without the relevant governance in place, you can do a lot of things that, should be governed.
The other point I'd make is that this isn't a sudden moment of change. This is a change that started decades ago and will go on for decades. And if you look at big industry now, it is broadly highly automated. Obviously, it could still go further and probably will, but the employment impact on big industry will be significantly less than the employment impact in SMEs. And you've got, on this call, we've got some fantastic examples of highly tech capable SMEs, but there are many that are not, and they will adapt and they will change, because the competitive instinct will make them do so, and will make them adopt technology as they go along. So so long as we have a really good skills agenda, so that those who do find themselves squeezed acquire the skills which enable them to prosper as technology plays more of a role. I'm a great optimist. You look at the 19th century and the change that happened then from the agrarian to the industrial economy. Everyone was predicting, just as, as Barry said, you read in the press today that this is going to be millions of people without a job. The opposite happened. More people got more jobs. There was a huge democratization of work as well. and fundamentally things became better and more prosperous as a result. And I'm a great believer that can happen again.
I like the optimism of the Whiggish view of history, which leads me on to my final question for everybody to ask, what's next? So either, you know, the exciting development that you know most people won't have heard of, or what will start to become, you know, tangible in your area for people to see. So I will go in reverse order from the start. Barry, what's next? What's
next for me personally, or for the company, or generally? Sorry.
Yeah, so the company or generally in this area.
Can you come to me last? Can I think about that?
Yeah, sure. Elizabeth, you're not going to be short of a word or two.
No, like I say, we've massively adopted automation on both the micro level and what we do as a business. We're looking for more ways to use machine learning. Google talks about their machine learning. It only works on 3% of your spend, which is why the results are very limited. Our machine learning works on 97% of your spend, which is why it's so effective. Matthew made a fantastic point about why are people not putting the data they're looking at on their balance sheet. We looked at over $500 million worth of spend before we launched our MLog product. I'm thinking, why have I not got that written down somewhere? So I'm going to go back to my balance sheet now and start putting other things in there, because we know such a lot from looking at things. So I think what's next for me is, and also some of the tech we've got, we've not really put a proper, we amortize everything, but I'm going to start looking at it slightly differently. Obviously, as far as the machine learning and AI goes, it just goes on and on and on. It is relentless. You can automate every little thing. Like I say, we're looking at our clients and trying to figure out the gaps in their sides now and compensate for that too. So it's relentless, and it gets faster and faster and faster. And I'd like to see the schools catch up as well.
Great.
Go on, Barry, you must be ready to say something now.
Yeah, I suppose that, you know, technology to enable more humans to do what humans are best at, which is talking, building relationships, solving problems by being creative, rather than getting bogged down in monotonous tasks that computers are perfect to do. So maybe AI is not just artificial intelligence, but it's automating intuition.
I like the sound of that. Matthew, what's your view?
Well, I think over the next few years, there's going to be a revolution in open data. You know, people realizing that you get more value out of the data you have if you share it with others and they share theirs with you. And I think that ability to understand how our entire economic and social system is working to much greater granularity will unlock all sorts of fantastic things, including for the climate, for quality of work, for learning and so forth.
Great. Furqan?
I think I agree with Matthew's view there. We're seeing it already, more and more people collecting data, making it more readily available for others to kind of develop on top of and learn from. I see kind of a short-term view and a long-term view. I think there's a bigger data story in terms of how that's going to be managed through kind of data passports and monetization of information on a personal data level. But I think in the short term, what you'll see is that the big companies investing in automation on behalf of the SMEs, so the Microsofts, the Googles, etc., building that technology into the day-to-day to better help manage some of the tasks. And then I think you'll see some real innovation on the edge, which is looking 3 to 5 years ahead, whereas Paul put quite well earlier, for automation to really be successful, you need strong data models. So I think it will happen in stages, data collection and mining, like Matthew was mentioning, to then the learning and the automation developing, and then seeing some really cool tech on the back of that.
And Paul, the final word to you.
Just to keep it quite simple, I think AI is in its infancy in terms of data at the moment, in terms of how it's using data. So I expect it to grow like a human, you know, over those sort of years and evolve more intelligently. I think there's certain exciting pieces that I think will come. So I think implantable technology will be part of humans, you know, so we can actually monitor our health without looking at an app or using a wearable. And it will tell us when we're ill and when we're not. I think the future is probably biomedical in terms of healthcare. I do think there'll be big pushes there. but ultimately it will lead to prevention and prediction and personalisation, as Barry put it. And I think that will mean, you know, we'll solve problems with human healthcare and pet healthcare in our case, but it will probably lead to new problems that we'll have to solve.
No, that's it. Solve one problem and another problem springs up. But you know, it's been a fascinating discussion over the last hour. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. So I'd like to thank our panellists, Paul, Furqan, Elizabeth, Barry, and Matthew, for your contributions. That's been a really interesting discussion. I hope everyone has found it to be interesting and had lots of food for thought over our time this morning. Just to highlight, there'll be a write-up of this webinar, as well as several accompanying features in our Pace of Change coverage, which will be out a week on Thursday on the 22nd. So do look out for that. And I hope you have a good day, and thanks for joining us. Goodbye.